Test, test. I had menudo this morning. Test, test, test. Test, 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 test. Let's hear it. Okay. I got up at 6 o'clock. No, I got up at 5:30 to go to drop Milan off with Eileen. And then we went and had menudo at the little gym. At 6 o'clock in the morning, we were the only people there. We were up really late last night, and then we got up really early. But it was really nice to spend time with Eileen alone. We went on a date at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was nice. Well, two things. Shabbat Shalom and say Chag. No, not Chag. Chag Sameach. Chag means festival and Sameach means joyful. See, it's like, happy festival. Joyful festival. Chag Sameach, because we are in the middle right now of Sukkot. When I say the middle, I literally mean middle, the dead center of Sukkot. So, because we're at the dead center of Sukkot, and Yeshua did something on the dead center of Sukkot, that's what I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach on the dead center of Sukkot, which I've never done before, by the way. Go back so you don't get distracted. So, usually on Sukkot, I teach about what he did in John chapter 7. Let's go to John chapter 7. But later on in the chapter, in chapter 7, where it says, on the great day of the feast, which is Hosha'ana Rabbah. And I've always taught this because it's like one of my favorite times of the year. Good folks, look at John. So John chapter 7, if you don't have a Bible, you are going to be lost. You're going to be lost. John chapter 7. Verse 37. From there onward is what I've always taught, because that's on the great day of the feast. But I've never taught on the middle of the feast. You know why? Because Shabbat never ended, that I remember, in the middle of the feast. So I never really thought about it before. But this year, I was reading this and I was like, hey, wait a minute. This Shabbat is going to be dead center in Sukkot, and that's when Yeshua taught something else, besides when he taught on Hosha'ana Rabbah. So let's go to John chapter 7, verse 14. Well, verse 12. No. Yeah, that's right, verse 14. But it was when it was now the midst of the feast. Now in Greek, midst is like kind of generic, but in Hebrew it's not. Chetzi literally means half, right dead center in the middle. Why are you taking that away from me?
Doesn't have battery.
Oh, it doesn't have that. Okay. So you were doing that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Let's keep that up. Okay. When it was now the dead middle of the feast. Now today is, 15, 16, 17. Today's the 18th. Today's the 18th of Tishri. And I don't have a pointer, so I can't point. The 18th, it's right in the middle of Sukkot. Now, in Sukkot, the 15th, the first day of Sukkot, is a Shabbat. And then, this is not correct. It says the 21st is a Shabbat. That is not correct. It may be a Shabbat. Happens sometimes. But it's the next day, the 8th day, that is a Shabbat, big Sabbath, high Sabbath. So, don't let this confuse you. Day 1 is always a high Sabbath. Day 8 is always a high Sabbath. But because it's the 7th day of the festival, it's considered a low Sabbath, a small Sabbath. That's why it says in verse 37, on the last day the great day of the feast. That seventh day of the festival is the last day of the festival, the great day of the festival, called Hosha'ana Rabbah, the high Hosanna. So that's why I had that shaded in. It's not a Shabbaton. It's not a high Sabbath. The next day is a high Sabbath. But for the purposes of what I'm going to teach you today, I shaded in day 1 and day 7. Does that make sense? Did you follow that? Yeah? Okay. So, let's go back to verse 14. We're just going to read through this passage real quick. When it was now the middle of the feast, Yeshua went up to the temple and began to teach. The Jews therefore were marveling. And it says Jews, it means Judeans, those from Judah. The Judeans therefore were marveling, saying, how has this man become learned, having never been educated? It doesn't mean he didn't go to school. It means he wasn't under a rabbi. He wasn't in a yeshiva, a school of a rabbi. Because everybody who wanted to learn Torah was under a rabbi. This guy wasn't. Yeshua wasn't. Think about it, that's pretty big. That's a whole teaching in itself. That Yeshua was never in a yeshiva of a rabbi. Shaul, Paul was. Remember who his rabbi was? Gamaliel. Yeah. Gamaliel was his rabbi. But Yeshua didn't have one. He learned Judaism, but he wasn't under a rabbi. So they're like, how does he know all this? He never went to yeshiva of thus and such rabbi. So they were freaking out about it. Yeshua therefore answered them and said, my teaching, my doctrine, my teaching is not mine, but it's his who sent me. In other words, I do have a rabbi. And it's not mine. You're not hearing what I believe, you're hearing what my rabbi believes. That's what he's saying. If you look at it in a Jewish context, if you just read this out of a Jewish context, it makes no sense. It sounds very ethereal. My doctrine is not mine, but of him who sent me. It sounds very spooky and ethereal and stuff like that. But in the Jewish world, it's very simple. You got no rabbi. How do you know so much? Hey, I don't teach what I know. I teach what my rabbi taught me. So that's what he's talking about. If any man is willing to do his will, the one who sent me, he will know of the teaching. He'll know it, whether it's of God or whether I speak from myself. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who is seeking the glory of the one who sent him, he is true, and there's no unrighteousness in him. Didn't Moshe give you the Torah, and yet none of you carries out the Torah? Why are you trying to kill me? Now this made them just infuriated. Because, first of all, he knew they were trying to kill him. And they weren't supposed to know that. It was he's trying real hard to keep it quiet. But he knew. So that made him mad. And secondly, it made him mad that he told people whose whole life is Torah, 24/7. You know the Torah, but you don't even keep it. I mean, that is infuriating. So they were really mad. Didn't Moshe give you the Torah? Yet none of you carries out the Torah. I mean, that's really, really heavy, mean words. The multitude answered, you have a demon. Who's trying to kill you? Yeshua answered and said to them, and I did one miracle and you freak out about it. I like that translation. Not, I did one deed and you all marvel. I did one little miracle and you freak out about it. That's what he said. Now, he had done like 50 zillion miracles by that time. But he says, I did one miracle. And you freak out. I wonder which one he's talking about. What he talks about. I did one miracle. You all freak out. On this account, Moshe has given you circumcision. Now, this is strange. This is one of the things I'm going to teach about today. I'm going to teach three things. Number one, I'm going to teach why Yeshua taught in the middle of the festival. What it's a picture of. Number two, I'm going to teach a tiny little bit about circumcision. And then the bulk of the teaching is going to be about this concept that, yeah, I got a rabbi and he sent me. It's about the shaliach, or the sent one, the apostle. That's the bulk of what I'm going to teach you. Right here he talks about circumcision, even though he just said, I did one miracle, we all freak out about it. You know what? That's why Moses gave you circumcision. It's weird. What, did Yeshua circumcise somebody? It's just strange. Moshe gave you circumcision, not because it was from Moshe, but because it was from the fathers. And on Shabbat, you circumcise. If a man receives circumcision on Shabbat, so the Torah of Moshe may not be broken, are you angry with me because I made an entire man well? Hey, thank you. Are you mad because I made an entire man well? I think maybe you missed that. If a man receives circumcision, so the Torah of Moshe will not be broken, etc. I made an entire man well on Shabbat. Don't judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. So some of the people of Jerusalem are saying, is this the man that they're trying to kill? Isn't this the guy that they were trying to kill? And look, he's speaking publicly. They're not saying anything to him. The rulers don't really know that he is the Messiah, do they? However, we know where this man's from. But when the Messiah comes, nobody really knows where he's from, which, by the way, is not true. That was not true. That was just a rumor. Yeshua therefore cried out in the temple, teaching and saying, you know me and you know where I'm from. I have not come of myself, but he who sent me is true. You don't know. I know him because I'm from it, and he sent me. So it goes back to that teaching about sent, being sent. All right. So this is what I'm teaching on right here. On the 18th, Yeshua goes up to the temple to the feast. And by the way, this got me in trouble last year because I said this, what it says in verse 4. Verse 3. His brothers therefore said to him, depart from here, get out of here. Go to Judea, so your disciples may behold your works, all your miracles that you're doing. For nobody does anything in secret, and he himself seeks to be known publicly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. Go out publicly, go do it in front of everybody. For not even his brothers were believing in him. Yeshua therefore said to them, no, it's not my time yet. But your time, you've always got your time because the world loves you, but the world doesn't love me. The world hates me. Because its deeds are evil. I talk about their deeds. They don't like them. Verse 8. Go up to the feast yourself. Go up to Sukkot yourself. I am not going up to this feast because my time has not yet come. It's not time for me to go up to the feast. I'm not going. He lied. And this got me in trouble last year because I said it's so obvious in the text unless you read into it. He lied to his brothers. He lied to them. Because the very next verse says, and then he went. He told them, I'm not going up. I'm not going up to Sukkot. And then he goes up to Sukkot. He lied. It's no big deal. God did this constantly in the scriptures. Constantly. By the way, the Jews in the Holocaust did this 1,000,000 times a day. And it's a particular thing about the Jewish sense of humor that you can lie, and it's not a lie. Lying is when you want to get something for yourself. But God lied all the time. We call it lying because we don't know what else to call it. But saying something and then doing something else. It's not hypocrisy, it's not lying, it's not deceiving. But it is sort of deceiving. Because Yeshua said, no, you go up, I'm not going up. And then verse 9, and having said these things to them, he stayed together thinking. But when his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he himself also went up, not publicly, but in secret. He hid the fact that he went up. He lied to them. And he did it on purpose. And he had a purpose in doing it. And I'm going to tell you what the purpose is. This is the purpose. So he could go on the middle of the feast. So he didn't go before the middle of the feast. But like I said, Judaism, you have to dig for it. The closer you get to God's heart, the more you do Judaism, the harder things around you get. That's just the way it is. And God does that on purpose. Because bread does not grow on trees. You have to dig for it. And so it is with the scriptures. God is not going to stick it in front of you and go, here, baby, here, take it. You've got to dig. So Yeshua says, no, you guys go up, I'm not going. And he walks away. And then a couple days later, he goes up. And they don't know he's there, do they? Do they know he's there? No, because he lied to them. And he did it so that he could show up here and not a minute sooner. He wanted to be there at the middle of the feast. And there's a very, very good reason for it. So even Yeshua lying about going up to the feast, there's a purpose and a picture in it that's really, really important. Come on, baby. It ain't working. Oh, there it is. But when it was now the middle of the feast, Yeshua went up to the temple and began to teach. And remember, he just lied about doing it so that he could be secretive. He could be in secret. Here's why he did it. This is important. This 7 days of the festival is also a picture of the 7 days in God's plan of 6,000 years, and then the Shabbat. 6,000 years, and then the Shabbat. Day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The midpoint is when Yeshua came. Yeshua died in the year 4,000, at the very, very end of the middle of the week. Here's the middle of the week of years. Year 1,000, 2,000, 3, 4, 5,000, 6,000, and then comes the Day of the Lord. So in this week of years, of 1,000-year days, it has a midpoint. 3,500, year 3,500. Do you know when that was? Do you know what was going on in Israel? Anybody?
Destruction of the temple.
It's after the destruction of the temple. Ezra is just about to go up to Jerusalem and reestablish Judaism. Ezra is the one who gave us the synagogue. There was no such thing as a synagogue before Ezra. There was no such thing as written down prayers before Ezra. They didn't have prayer books in ancient Israel. They knew the prayers by heart. They knew them. And they would say them. Well, when Ezra came to reestablish Jerusalem and the temple, he basically recreated Judaism. The year 3,500 is right before Ezra came back to Jerusalem to do this. I'm talking about like 10 years before. The year 4,000, 500 years later, is the year Yeshua died. What day did all this take place? What day? What day?
Fourth day.
Day 4. Yeshua showed up to the temple on day 4. And he lied about it to do it. So that his brothers were like, why don't you just go up to Jerusalem? Man, there's 1 million people in Israel. Go preach to them. And he's like, no, I'm not going. And then he goes a couple days later. They were speaking to him right here. Right before Sukkot. He waits 1, 2, 3 days. And then he goes up. And so it was with the whole history of Israel. Here's creation, Noah, Abraham, and then into day 3 is everything. David, Solomon, the kings, and then the Jewish people were kicked out of Israel for 70 years into day 4. Come back under Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, day 4, right in the middle. Then 500 years pass, and Yeshua comes. He shows up, and he starts preaching. And then he's dead, and he provides salvation. All of that takes place in day 4. All the big stuff takes place in day 4. That's why he lied. It's not arbitrary. It's to create a pattern. It's to follow the pattern that he created from the beginning. But right here is when Yeshua is going to die. 2 days later, day 5, day 6, and then 2 days later comes the kingdom, which we bring up before later. So this midpoint is really important. And I never taught on it before. This is going to be the first time I've ever taught on what he taught here, the midpoint. I always teach on what he taught on the great day of the feast. But I've never taught when he taught in the middle of the feast. And why did he teach this in the middle of the feast? All right. So let's go back to John. verse 21. Here's the first thing that I'm going to teach about in the talk. Verse 21 through 23. Forward it. Okay, here we go. On Shabbat, you circumcise a person. By the way, it does not say a man. It says anthropo in Greek, which is just like a human being. Of course it's a man, but it doesn't say a boy. It doesn't say a little boy. When do people get circumcised? On the 8th day. But he says, you circumcise a person. So this could be an adult also. So in verse 22, on this account Moshe is giving you circumcision, not because it came from Moshe, but it came from the fathers. And on Shabbat, you circumcise a person. On Shabbat, you circumcise a person. If a man receives circumcision, or a person receives circumcision on Shabbat, so the Torah of Moshe may not be broken, you're angry with me because I made a whole person well on Shabbat? Do you see what he's saying? You circumcise on Shabbat. I made a whole person well. What is he saying about circumcision? That it makes some part of a person well. He's saying, you perform circumcision on a guy on Shabbat, so the Torah of Moshe is not broken. It's a good thing. I make a whole human being well on Shabbat, and that makes you mad. So, in other words, circumcision is supposed to do something to a person to make part of them well. Not a whole person, but a part of the person. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not just cutting away foreskin. Now, this is from the Mishnah. And this gives us some detail. I'm not going to talk about all this because it's very weird. But this is giving us some details about how circumcision was and is among the Orthodox still done. This is from the Mishnah Shabbat, chapter 19, Mishnah 2. They may perform on Shabbat all things necessary for circumcision. Now, in the church, they like to say, you know, the Jews came with all these laws to pile on top of the Bible and ruin the Bible. This is some of those Jewish laws that they're talking about. And it says in the Mishnah, anything according to, you know, to try to do circumcision on Shabbat, you can do that. You're free to do it. It's a good thing. They may perform on Shabbat everything necessary for circumcision. Circumcising, tearing the corona, sucking, placing upon it a bandage, and cumin, putting cumin on. If it had not been pounded up on the eve of Shabbat, one may chew it with his teeth. When I read that, I'm like, say, what? May chew what with his teeth? And apply it. If one had not mixed wine and oil on the eve of Shabbat, each may be applied by itself. And then here's the footnotes in the Mishnah that tell what each little part means. Circumcising, tearing the corona. That means to uncover the corona, split the membrane, and pull it back. So that's how circumcision is done. Sucking. Suck the wound to compress the blood vessels. And yes, it is exactly what you think it means. I don't want to talk about it, but that's what it means. Placing upon it a bandage, which is like a plaster or a compress for healing and softening the wound. And then cumin, putting on cumin and caraway. And then this bushimav is the teeth. It means like with the teeth. And what that means is it's a mixture used for remedy that they would chew with their mouth and get it soft, like masticate it, get it all soft, and then put it on the wound. So that part's not as weird as it sounds, but this is sucking. Now I looked up circumcision in the Jewish Encyclopedia, the one that's printed, that was published in 1898. And it tells in detail how to do circumcision. And sucking the womb is part of that process. I don't think you could get away with that in America. But that's how it was done. That's how God set it up. If you don't like that, too bad. That's the way God set it up. It's a weird picture, but it is a picture. So all of this could be done on Shabbat, which is a big deal. Because in Shabbat, in the Mishnah of Shabbat, it says you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do this. And it breaks down into the tiniest details what you shouldn't do and what you should do. And most of it is dead on. It's great pictures. Some of it is ridiculous. And some of it is fantastic. This is all fantastic. So, who was the first Jew? Who was the first Jew?
Judah.
Judah? Abraham? Abraham was the first Jew. He was a Gentile, and then he was a Jew. Now, what that means, I don't know, but that's the way it is, because he was the first guy that circumcised himself at the age of 90, right? Was it 90 or 99? I think it was 90. Circumcised himself at the age of 90. Yeah, no kidding. Now, how he did all this, I do not know, but that was the picture. So he circumcised himself, and it says that without the faith of Abraham, it is impossible to make God happy. Without the faith that Abraham had, it is impossible to make God happy. If that doesn't bother you, there's something wrong in your brain. That bothers me incredibly. Without the faith that Abraham had, I can't please God. I can't make God happy. Think about that. So the faith of Abraham started back before he was circumcised, when God told him everything that God was promising to him. Well, in order to receive those promises, he had to circumcise himself. And when he circumcised himself, he saw and he got understanding. That's what faith is. Now, in Judaism, faith means understanding. And without understanding, the understanding that Abraham had, it is impossible to please God, to make God happy. Let's go back one. In John 8, no, in John, just lost it. 10:58, I believe. Yeshua said, Abraham saw my day and rejoiced to see it. He saw my day and rejoiced to see it. Check me on that. I think it's 10:58. Here's what Abraham saw. He saw this 7,000-year plan of God. And he saw from here, right out here, he saw into the future to the day of Yeshua. In other words, the time that Yeshua was on earth. He saw it with his own eyes. When he was going to sacrifice his son, he saw it. And he got understanding. But he also saw to the day of the Lord. My day, God's day, the day of the Lord. He saw both times when he was going to sacrifice his son Yitzchak. Because it says in the passage, I and the boys, we're going to come back to you. I and the boy, Isaac, we're going to come back to you guys. You stay here at the bottom of the mountain. We're going to come back to you. Even though he was going to kill his son. And he'd already said he was going to kill his son. But he says, I and the boy are going to come back to you. So therefore, what was he saying? He was saying, the boy is going to be killed and resurrected. And we're going to come back to you. So he knew that God was going to resurrect Isaac. And he was looking for this resurrection, which happens all the way in the day of the Lord. So he saw 2 days in the future to the day of Yeshua, and he saw 5 days in the future to the day of the Lord at the same moment. He saw the whole plan of God, just like that. And he got faith. And that's what faith is. It's understanding. So the more understanding you get of God, that's what makes God happy. That's what makes him happy. It's the faith of Abraham. When he circumcised himself, he got understanding. He saw something. Now Yeshua's words, again, were this. I need to go forward. Yeshua's words were this. If a person receives circumcision on Shabbat, so Torah Moshe is not broken, you're here because I made an entire man well, not just a penis. An entire man was made well. Well, in Judaism, it's obviously the penis is not getting well. It's the faith, it's the understanding that we're given about the covenant about God cutting and circumcising the human heart. And it says that in the prophets. Circumcise your heart. Circumcise your heart. That I may, have a relationship with you. Well, that's becoming well, isn't it? That's becoming, at least part of us is becoming well. Yeshua said, I didn't just make the dude's heart well, I made the whole body well too, and that makes you mad. So, what I'm trying to tell you is that these two things are a corollary. There's part one and part two. Part one is circumcision makes part of us well. And Yeshua, part two, made an entire guy well on Shabbat. So, anybody can circumcise on Shabbat without breaking the Torah. Why? Because it makes us well. It makes at least part of us well. And that's what God wants. And Yeshua loved to heal on Shabbat. He still does. Yeshua loves to heal on Shabbat. Because that's what Shabbat's for. It's for making us well. Make sense? It's for making us well. And when people cop the attitude of, I don't know if we can do that on Shabbat. We need to just rest and we need to just, chill. I just want to be left alone, just to be with God and myself. And just, not doing that. I don't want to turn the lights on. I don't want to get in the car. I don't want to do anything. I just want to honor the Shabbat. That's not honoring Shabbat. It sounds like it's honoring Shabbat, but it's not. Honoring Shabbat is going out and making people well. Getting together and healing each other. Helping each other. Blessing each other. Lifting each other up. That's Shabbat. Now, I don't know what you're used to, but I'm Jewish and I was raised at least with a little bit of Shabbat. And it was always getting together and getting into it. And helping each other. Talking to each other. What's your problem this week? Well, let me tell you. And then you help each other. You talk to each other. That's Shabbat. At least one little part of it. So, anything that makes us better people, anything that makes us get better, that's what Shabbat's for. It's not for just getting by yourself and just, chilling with God. There's a time for that, but not on Shabbat. You can do that, later on in Shabbat. But Shabbat is for making us whole. Making us whole. That only happens with other human beings. It doesn't happen alone with God. Part of it does, but that's not what Shabbat is. Shabbat is so we get together and help make each other whole. That was God's plan from the beginning. That's why Jews get together on Shabbat. So, this was his motive, to make the whole man well. And that's why he taught it. When did he teach it? At the middle of the festival. In the middle of the festival. Which is a picture of when Yeshua came. He came in the fourth day, middle of the week. And then he provided salvation. That's why he did it in the middle of the week. So that's why, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, that's why he spoke about circumcision on the middle week. He didn't save it for the end of the week. He taught about it in the middle of the week. Alright, so that's all I'm going to say about circumcision. Let's go on to the next. Alright, now, the next part he talked about. In verse 16, verse 18, verse 28, 29, and 33, he repeated 5 times this one theme. Verse 16, my teaching is not mine, but it belongs to him who sent me. Say the word shaliach. Shaliach. Now that's a sent one. A sent one. An apostle. A sent one. The root is shalach. Say shalach. Shalach. Shalach means to send. It's the form of the verb to send. Shaliach is one who's sent out from shalach. Something sent forth, sent away, something thrown, a missile, a dart, a spear, a weapon, something that goes from point A to point B. That's a shaliach. They get from point A to point B. They get people from point A to point B. That's their job. And I don't know what you've heard about the shaliach or the apostle, but it's not like the Superman of the gifts that can do all the other 5. That's not what it is. Nor is it a church planter. That's not an apostle. It's not what their job is. They might do it, but that's not their job. They are not like supermen that were with Yeshua, and then when all the people that were with Yeshua died out, there's no more apostles. That's crazy, because then there are no apostles to get anything done in the body of God. And in the body of God, we're told that there are apostles. We're told this over and over again in the New Testament. But we're told this more in the Old Testament. And that's what I'm going to show you. In verse 18, he who is seeking the glory of the one who sent him. Verse 28, I have not come of my own volition, but he who sent me is true. I am from him. I am from him. I am. One of the titles of God. Anochi. I am. Anochi le'Elohim. Anochi le'Elohim. I am from God. And he sent me. Verse 33, for a little while longer I'm with you, then I'm going to go back to him who sent me. 5 times he repeats, I'm the apostle, I'm the apostle, I'm the apostle, I'm the apostle, I'm the apostle. Over and over again. Now they knew what an apostle was because they had a rich history of 4,000 years, actually at this time, 2,000 years of knowing what an apostle is. The church now has had 2,000 years to figure out what an apostle is. Both the Jewish people didn't recognize what an apostle is by the time Yeshua came, nor has the church understood what an apostle is. And they've had 2,000 years. So we've all blown it. Both Jews and Christians have blown it. Nobody really understands what an apostle is. I don't think I do either. I just get little tiny bits and pieces. Let's go to Matthew 23. There's 2 passages here. 2 passages here that sum up 4 passages in the Old Testament. Matthew 23, verse 34. Therefore, behold, I am sending you prophets and wise men and scribes. Prophets, wise men, and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, that upon you may fall all the guilt of the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Baruch or Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. This had not happened yet. This Zechariah ben Baruch, he hadn't been killed yet. Guess when he's killed? 33 years after Yeshua's death. 33 years after Yeshua's death. It's recorded all over the place. In Josephus, in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, it's recorded that this guy, Zechariah ben Baruch, was murdered between the temple and the altar. And yet he says it in past tense. You killed all the righteous blood is going to fall on you guys. From the blood of righteous Abel, 7th from Adam. No, that's not true. 2nd from Adam. All the way to this guy who hasn't even died yet, and he's prophesying about his death, which happens in 33 years. But he says, I am sending you prophets, wise men, and scribes. So it sounds like it's future tense. It's not. He's talking about the past. Look at Luke chapter 11. This is the parallel passage to that passage in Matthew. Luke chapter 11, verse 49 says, for this reason also the wisdom of God said. This is a parallel passage. Matthew doesn't say anything about the wisdom of God saying. He says that Yeshua said, I'm going to send you. But we know from the parallel passage that what he said is, the wisdom of God said in the past, I will send to them prophets and apostles. And some of them they will kill, and some they will persecute, in order that the blood of all the prophets shed since the foundation of the world may be charged against this generation, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who perished between the altar and the house of God. Yes, I tell you, it will be charged against this generation. It's a parallel passage. And yet, it adds here that it was the wisdom of God in the past that said this. So, who did the wisdom of God say was going to be sent to Israel? He said, prophets, wise men, scribes, and apostles. 4 different kinds of people, I guess. So, where does it say that? Well, where it says it is in these 4 passages. 2 Chronicles 36, Jeremiah 7, Jeremiah 26, and Jeremiah 33. In all 4 passages, it says what Yeshua is quoting here. Now remember, the Word became flesh. The Tanakh became a guy. So anything out of that guy's mouth, where do you have to be able to find it? The Tanakh, right? So that's how this is. Yeshua didn't say this because he was, just some amazing Superman. He said this because he was this in flesh. And so this came out of his mouth. The way it came out is recorded by Luke and Matthew, and they're different. You get 2 different little facets. All right, so we're going to go over these passages. Don't get scared by the next slide. Okay? We're not going to go over all these. Next slide. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. Look at it. That's crazy. These are the passages in the Bible. No, these are some of the passages. Some of the passages in the Bible that talk about the apostle. Some. Look where they all are. They're all in the Tanakh, not one in the New Testament. And these are some of the passages. I couldn't put them on, I couldn't fit them on the page. I thought, I'm not going to put 2 slides. That'll just make you leave and never come back. So we're not going to go over all these, but we'll go over some of them. The ones I think are probably the most salient points for us. So the apostle, the sent one, remember, Yeshua said 5 times, my doctrine is not mine. It belongs to the one who sent me. I'm not here because I want to be here. I'm here because he sent me. My doctrine isn't mine. I speak what he sent me to speak. Right? Over and over again. Well, here's what they understood. Or at least some of them understood when he said this. Numbers chapter 13. We're going to look at this one. You know this one. It's about the 12 spies. It doesn't say spies in Hebrew. It says shlachim, 12 apostles. Isn't that interesting? That Moses sent out 12 apostles and Yeshua sent out 12 apostles. Why do you think that is? Because Yeshua is a picture, Moses was a picture of Yeshua. You look at Moses, you see Yeshua, just without the wrinkles, I guess. He was younger. But if you look at Moses, look at the Torah, you see Yeshua. Because Moses was a picture of Yeshua. Moses sent out 12 shlachim, so Yeshua sent out 12 shlachim. Look at Joshua chapter 18. You're probably less familiar with this one. So you might want to look at Joshua chapter 18. Verse 4. Provide for yourselves 3 men from each tribe, that I may send them, that I may shlach them, and that they may arise and walk through the land and write a description of it according to their inheritance. Then they shall return to me, and they shall divide it into 7 portions. Judah shall stay in his territory in the south, and then we'll divide up the rest of the land. This is Joshua's apostles, or Yeshua's apostles. Joshua's other name is Yeshua. Let's go back one slide, please. Look at this. This is what people do not understand. Nobody understands this. Jews don't understand it. Gentiles don't understand it, just regular Gentiles. Christians don't understand it. Messianic people don't understand it. It is the most salient point that we have to understand if you're going to understand who Yeshua is and was. If I say to somebody who's a believer, do you believe in the Trinity? Most say, yes, of course. If I say, do you believe that that Yeshua was fully God and fully man? They say, yes, of course. If I say to them, you just contradicted yourself, they get mad at me. In Judaism, it says, God is non-corporeal. That means has no body, and non-describable. You cannot describe him. He's non-corporeal, has no body. How can Yeshua be God if he has a body? Yeshua prayed to God. Why would God pray to God? Now, I could come up with a million explanations and arguments, but none of it makes any difference. This does. This is the bottom line. And it's so simple. It's so simple. The main point of the Jewish law of agency. Agency is this concept of being a shaliach, being an apostle. The main point of Jewish law of agency is expressed in the dictum: a person's agent is regarded as the person himself. If Michael is my agent, he goes out as me. He is me. He is regarded as me. If Yeshua is sent out by the Father, he is the Father. You look at him and you hear the words of the Father, because he's the agent. He is the shaliach. Jews understood this anciently. They don't anymore. They've lost this. So Christians never knew it. Yeshua was not God when he was on earth. He was not God. He was God before he came to earth. He was God, it says in Romans chapter 1, after his resurrection, but he was not God while he was on earth. He was the agent. He was the shaliach. It is so simple. It's such a simple, beautiful explanation. And by the way, this is as close as we can get to an explanation. Anything else we say is going to be wrong. He was fully God and fully man. He was fully black and he was fully white. He was fully up and he was fully down. He was fully smart and he was fully stupid. You can't do that. You're contradicting yourself. Any explanation about Yeshua on earth is going to be a contradiction. Unless you say the person's agent is regarded as the person himself. That's why Yeshua said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. That's why he said it. He was the agent. He was the shaliach. Now, if you can get your head wrapped around that, if you can, and that's a big one, I realize that. It's going to take some time for a lot of people to understand that. I've been working with this I think I got this understanding right around 17 years ago. So I've had it for that long. It's easy for me. I get it. It's easy. It's like breathing in, breathing out. But for some people, this is really, really, really difficult. I get it. I understand that. So if you need to work with this and think about it, go into the scriptures and look at all the time. Not just 5. All the times that Yeshua said something like, I just healed the leper. Don't give me any credit. Give it to the Father. All those passages, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, why do you call me good?
Yeah, why do you call me good? There's only one that's good. That's a good one. The Father. How about these? He heals somebody, he says, tell no one. Don't tell anybody I did this. Why did he do that? Because he wants to get everybody pointed to the one that sent him. And all the passages, and there's a lot of them that say, I was sent. I was sent. I'm the sent one. There's lots of them. Not just these. There's lots of them. So I would suggest you do that on your own, so you can get this fully solidified in the brain. Because this is a big one. It's tough. You say this in the church, they'll kick you out. Yeshua wasn't God on earth. They'll just kick you out, and you're done. That's heresy. I was told to my face by, I think, 6 Christians over the years, that is anathema. You are going to hell, sir. He told me that to my face. You are going to hell, sir. Good for you. Well, you got to work with it for it to become really easy to work with. It's a very, very easy concept. And I've given you where to find it in Judaism. It's in 2 passages in the Talmud, summed up by Zvi Werblowski under agent in Encyclopedia of the Jewish Religion. Give you 3 different places you can look. All right. Let's go to the next slide, please. So let's look at just a few of these. This is the Jewish understanding of the apostle. Let's go to Let's not go to this one. Let's look at it right here. Samuel. God says, I will send you to Jesse, for I have chosen a king for me. Well, he's referring to the last one, King Saul. 1 Samuel 9:16. I will send a man to be prince over Israel. In other words, I'm going to make Saul, King Saul, an apostle, and he's the king. So his title is king. What's his job? Apostle. So you can be other things. I'm a teacher. I'm a school teacher. But I am definitely not a teacher. I am an apostle. That's my job. That's my gift. I'm an apostle. And I know what my gift is. But I can do all kinds of stuff. I can be a rabbi. I can be a teacher. And they're not the same thing. I can do all kinds of things. So it is with King Saul. He was the king, but he was also, at that time, an apostle. Now Samuel was sent. I will send you to Jesse to find the next king, which was King David. Jesse was David's daddy. So he says, I'm going to send you to Jesse, for I was chosen king for myself. So now Samuel's the apostle. Well, what was Samuel's job in Israel? What was he? He was a prophet. So he was both a prophet and an apostle. Now this one I definitely want to look at. Naaman, 2 Kings chapter 5. Say Naaman. Naaman. Now Naaman was a leper, and he was a Gentile, and he was a pagan worshiper. He was a Baal worshiper. And he was in a high position under the king of Assyria. And he was all these horrible things, and he was also an apostle. I will send a letter to the king. So he took 10 talents of silver. 2 Kings chapter 5. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon when he had heard that they had anointed him king. I have a long passage. 2 Kings. Isn't that interesting? That was also an apostle. Hiram sent his people out. Those were apostles. All right. Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Syria. Naaman, captain of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, highly respected because by him the Lord had given victory to all realm. The man was also a valiant warrior, but he was a leper. So he was all of this stuff, all of it. Now the Arabians had gone out in bands and taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel. Let's go down to verse 3. I wish that my master were with the prophet who was in Samaria, then he would cure him of his leprosy. So Naaman went in and told his master, saying, Thus and thus spoke the girl who was from the land of Israel. And the king of Aram said, Well, go now, and I will send a letter. Now, there are many, this is hard to explain. All the, quote, letters in the New Testament, they're not letters. They're like this kind of letter, which is not a letter. It's an apostle. It's a message from the king. And that's what the letters in the New Testament are. They are a shaliach, sent message from the king. Remember, the one carrying the letter is who? The one that sent him. It's the one that sent him. So Shaul, he goes out to all these Messianic congregations, and he does what he says is the most important thing. Do you know what it is? Gathering money for the Messianic Jews in Israel. That's what he says is the most important thing. Gathering money for the Messianic Jewish congregations in the land of Israel. And he says it about 20 times, but nobody ever hears it. I don't know. It's so, because when we read it, we don't know what we're reading. Well, he's being sent as an apostle with a letter to gather money for the Messianic Jews back in Israel. And so it is here. Same kind of thing. Naaman went in, told his master, and his master, verse 5 says, Go now, I'm going to send a letter to the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver. A talent is 96 pounds. That's 1,000 pounds of silver, right? Am I thinking correctly? 960 pounds of silver. 960 pounds of silver. What is that, $1 million? Why? Why is he sending $1 million with a leper? Because the leper is the apostle for that king. And that king is going to Israel. Even though he's not going to Israel, he's sending his apostle to Israel. And so Naaman is the king. Does that make sense? He departed and took with him 10 talents of silver and 6,000 of gold, 6,000 shekels of gold, another $1 million, and 10 changes of clothing. I don't know how much that cost. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, and now this letter comes to you. Behold, I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy. Here's the cash to do it. $2 million to heal this guy of leprosy. And it came about when the king of Israel read the letter that he freaked out. And he said, what am I, God, that I can heal people? Get out of here. And somebody says, are you out of your mind? There's a little prophet over in Israel, north of Israel. Send him over there. What's the big deal? It came about when the king tore his clothes. My God, to kill and make alive? Just trying to start a fight. Verse 8, it happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, and you're going to find out there's a God in Israel. Send him to me, and you're going to find out there's a God in Israel. Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha, and Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Elisha sent a messenger to him. Now this guy's name is Gehazi, the messenger. Now Gehazi is an apostle. We have Naaman being an apostle. We have Elisha being an apostle. And now we have Gehazi being an apostle of Elisha. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you shall be clean. And Naaman was furious, and he left. And I thought he was going to come out and, mumble some magic words and wave his hand over my flesh. I mean, there's better rivers in Syria. I don't need this nonsense. And there's somebody there who says, are you crazy? The guy tells you to do a little thing, you won't do it? If he told you to do some magnificent thing, would you do that? He told you to do a little thing. So Naaman goes, oh yeah, okay. And he does it. Verse 14, so he went down, and he dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and bam, he was healed. His flesh became brand new. This all happened because of apostleship. If God says something to you, and he sends you with that message, and you believe it, something will happen. It's like gravity. It will happen. If you come up with something out of your mind or your heart, and God didn't quite say that, something might happen, something might happen. But I guarantee you, if God sends you with something in your hand, a letter, and you go out and you deliver that letter, I guarantee you something will happen. Period. You can put everything you own on that as a stake on that. So, and by the way, everybody here, God will tell you something to bring somewhere. At some point, all of us will be an apostle. Everybody. At some point. And many times. Many of us, many times. So the trick is, number 1, to have the faith of Abraham. And see it and understand. And then go out. And remember, you're going out as the King. You're going out as God. You're going out as the Father. You're going out as the one who sent you. So you have that authority. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about anything. Just do the thing. And it'll produce fruit. Okay, let's go to 1 Chronicles 26. This is about David's men. David had his apostles. 1 Chronicles 26. This is when David is setting up the kingdom, the entire kingdom of God on earth. And he's in chapter 26, verse 29. It says this. As for the Israelites, Hananiah and his sons were assigned to outside duties for Israel as officers and judges. Now Christians read this for the most part, and it's like, they can't even pronounce the names, and it kind of stumbling, and it's hard to get through, so it kind of just goes in one ear and out the other. But this is really important. As for the Israelites, Hananiah and his boys, his sons, were assigned to outside duties for Israel as officers and judges. As for the Hebronites, the children of Hebron, Hashabiah and his brothers, 1,700 capable men had charge of the affairs of Israel west of the Jordan for all the work of the Lord and for the service of the king. David couldn't be on the other side of the Jordan, so he sent his apostles so they could be where David could not. And they were David. How many of them were there? 1,700 just of the Hebronites. I don't even know how many Israelites there were. How many apostles did Yeshua have?
12.
He did not have 12. He had 70. Remember it says he sent out his 70 apostles, and they went from city to city, preaching and teaching and healing. And he said, if you come to a bad house, just wipe your feet off and don't even go in. Go somewhere else, find a good place. 70 people he sent out. David had 1,700 apostles. And that was just the Hebronites. Verse 31, as for the Hebronites, Yariah, the chief, were investigated according to their genealogies and fathers in the 40th year of David's reign. And men of outstanding capability were found among them. And this is important. It's saying these were really quality guys, these apostles. They got it done because David couldn't be there. So he sent out his apostles to get it done. It's the same way with us. Yeshua sent out 70 guys because he couldn't be everywhere at once. Because he wasn't God. He was a shaliach himself. Only one of them. So he sent out his 70 manifestations or whatever. 70 guys that were him. To be him where he could not be. Let's look at the next one. Where are we? Priests and Levites. 2 Chronicles 17. I love this one. 2 Chronicles 17. Verse 7.
Michael?
Yes.
70 nations, 70 men.
Oh, thank you. Yes, there are 70 nations, and Yeshua had how many apostles? 70. So he sent out 70 because there's 70 nations. Very, very good. I always miss the obvious. Thank you. Verse 7. Then in the 3rd year of his reign, and this is about Yehoshaphat. In the 3rd year of his reign, he sent his officials, because their names, Ben-Chayil, Obadiah, Zechariah, Netanel, Micaiah, to teach in the cities of Judah. And with them the Levites, Shemaiah, Netaniah, Zebadiah, Asahel, Shemerimot, Yehonatan, Adoniah, Toviah, and Tovadoniah, the Levites, and with them Elishama and Yehoram, the Kohanim. And they taught in Judah, having the book of the Torah of the Lord with them. And they went throughout all the cities of Judah, just like Yeshua said to do. He said, go throughout all Judea, preaching the gospel of what? The kingdom. The Messianic kingdom. I don't have the clicker. The Messianic kingdom. The 7th day. These guys did the same thing, and they had the Torah with them to do it. These are apostles that were sent out to be where King Yehoshaphat could not be. So they were King Yehoshaphat wherever they went. All right. Now see these ones with the asterisks? 2 Chronicles, Jeremiah. Those are the ones that I told you that Yeshua was quoting, or what became flesh, when he said, the wisdom of God sent, what was it? Prophets, wise men, scribes, and apostles. And this is what they're quoting. So we'll look at these ones. 2 Chronicles 36. This is the last chapter of 2 Chronicles, which is, by the way, the last book in the Old Testament. Now it's not the last book in the Old Testament anymore, but that's how it is in the Jewish Bible. So in other words, this is the last thing that God said. The last thing God said wasn't through Malachi. The last thing God said was in 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles 36:15. And the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent to them again and again by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and made fun of his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, and there was no remedy. Now, who does it say was sent here? Who does it say was sent? His messengers. His messengers, right. His messengers. This is the word malach. It's also the word for angels. But in this case, the messengers are, who did they mock and despise? Prophets. So in this case, the messengers are prophets. And it says he sent them again and again and again and again and again. And it's summing up all of Jewish history, because we're in the last book of the Old Testament here. All right, let's look at Jeremiah chapter 7. Verse 25 basically says the same thing. Since the day that your fathers came out of the land of Egypt until this day. Now Jeremiah was prophesying after the destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon. So we're again at the end of the story. And he says, from the day they came out of Egypt to this day, I've sent you all my servants, the prophets, daily rising early and sending, shalach, sending them. So the prophets were the apostles. From the time they came out of Egypt. So who were the prophets when they came out of Egypt? Moses and Aaron. And Miriam too. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam were their prophets. Later on, there were 70 prophets that prophesied in the camp, the elders. But when they came out of Egypt, it was those three, and that's it. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, brothers and sisters. And they were shlachim, they were sent. And then from the time forward, God kept sending prophet after prophet after prophet. Jeremiah 26. Verse 5. Well, verse 4. You will say to them, thus says the Lord, if you will not listen to me, to walk in my Torah, which I have set before you, to listen to the words of my servants, the prophets, whom I have been shlachim, sending over and over and over again, but you wouldn't listen to them, then I'll make this house desolate. So he says over and over again, I sent my prophets, my servants, the prophets. Jeremiah 33. Jeremiah 33. Verse 15. In those 33 what? 15. I got the wrong verse here. I got the wrong verse. I don't have it underlined either. So, sorry, gave you the wrong. Say it again. What? I can't hear you. Anyway, there's another verse in Jeremiah in the late chapters. Wait a minute. I'm in the wrong chapter. Wait just a minute. No, I'm not. Jeremiah 53. So I gave you the wrong chapter, but back in these later chapters of Jeremiah, there's this other verse that says, I am sending you to the sons of Israel. Sorry, I sent all my servants, the prophets, and I sent them continuously. In other words, in Hebrew it says, rising early and sending. It's that phrase again that he said in the 2 Chronicles. So, over and over again, the wisdom of God. Listen to this. The wisdom of God sent. The wisdom of God sent people if you are sent by God, you are by nature an apostle. That's what an apostle is. An apostle goes from here to here. That's it. That's all their job is. To get from point A to point B. That's it. And whatever it takes, whatever that means, whatever stumbling block you need to get over, you go over it, or under it, or around it, or float over it, or something. You do it. That's what an apostle does. They get past stumbling blocks. They get past problems until they accomplish that task.
So apostles were, I'm misunderstanding the word
Shaliach.
Sent
Plural. Yes. Plural is shlachim. Singular is shaliach. And in some cases they were prophets. But not always. But they are shlachim. They're sent ones. And that's what an apostle is. So, and by the way, we only looked at a few of them. There's bad apostles, there's good apostles. Isaiah was an apostle, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, John is called an apostle, a sent one, with the spirit of Elijah. So there's all kinds of verses here. You can look at them yourself if you took a picture of it. There's one more I want to look at, Isaiah 66. This is hopefully going to clear up a little confusion that somebody had last week. Maybe more than one person had it, I don't know. But Isaiah, the last chapter. Last week when we were doing Yom Kippur, I had the Kohanim come up and do the Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the priests. And a couple people, I think, said, aren't we all priests? Yeah, but why can't you do Birkat Kohanim? You don't know how. Somebody's going to show you how. So you got to have the priest show you how. That's what the priests are for, to model the picture. Then once you got a model, then you can do it, if you pay attention. So in Isaiah 66, this is one verse that shows Gentiles that are shlachim, Gentile apostles in the day of the Lord. It's a really cool verse. Isaiah 66, 18 through 19 says, "For I know their works and their thoughts. The time is coming to gather all nations, all Gentiles and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. And I will set a sign among them." Among whom? The Gentiles. "And I will send, I will shalach, I will send survivors from them." From whom? The Gentiles. To the Gentiles. I will send survivors from the Gentiles to the Gentiles. Tarshish, Put, Lud, Meshech, Rosh, Tuval, and Yavan. This is the places where they're being sent. To the distant coastlands that have neither heard my fame or seen my glory, and they will declare my glory among the Gentiles. So God is going to take from among the Gentiles, turn them into apostles, and send them out just like the priests were sent out to teach the Torah. Because they have neither seen my fame, nor seen my glory, nor heard of my fame. And you will learn today. They're going to teach them about how amazing God is from the scroll of the book, from the Torah. And these are Gentiles in the day of the Lord. So yes, believers, Gentile believers, are priests. But that doesn't mean you automatically know how to do what priests are supposed to do. You got to learn. It takes time to learn. Verse 20. Then they being these Gentile priests, I'll call them, a new priesthood, they shall bring all your brothers from all the Gentiles as a grain offering to the Lord on horses and chariots and litters, on mules and camels, to my holy mountain Jerusalem. Just as the sons of Israel bring their grain offering, just as the sons of Israel bring their grain offering to the house of the Lord in a clean vessel. In other words, just like Israel acts as priests, these Gentiles are going to act as priests. And I will take some of them, the Gentiles who are bringing the Jews and the Jews that are being brought. I'm going to take some of them for priests and for Levites. Now, if that is not a clear passage that says that Gentiles are going to be part of the priesthood, nothing is. If you can't see it here, nothing else is going to show it to you more clearly. So, yes, Gentiles, believers they are in this priesthood, but that doesn't mean you know how to do what a priest does. You got to be taught how to do what a priest does. Okay, so we didn't look at all of these. Let's go to the next slide. But we looked at some of them. So now, back to the original premise. That Yeshua came in the middle of the feast as a picture of him coming in the middle of the 7-day plan of God. The first day is a Shabbat, and the 21st is not a Shabbat, the 22nd is a Shabbat, but it's a high day. It's a high day. Hoshana Rabbah. And so it is here. Day 1, kind of like a Sabbath, creation, Eden, was perfect. And then day 7, everything is going to revert to its Edenic state and go back to being like the Garden of Eden. So it's Eden recaptured, and it's a Shabbat because of that. And Yeshua came right in the middle and died in the year 4000. That's why he did what he did. Go to Hosea chapter 6. This is the last verse. Hosea chapter 6. Come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us, but he will heal us. He has wounded us, but he will bandage us. He will resurrect us, is what it says in Hebrew. Chayah. He will resurrect us after 2 days. He will raise us up on the 3rd day. Here's Yeshua's day. After 2 days, he will resurrect us. And on the 3rd day, he will raise us up. So in that one verse, it gives us 2 confirming details telling us the resurrection will be in day 7. If you count from Yeshua's death. After 2 days, he will resurrect us. And on the 3rd day, he will raise us up. And that's why Yeshua came. This is my opinion. That's why Yeshua came and began teaching. Lied about it first, so that he would stay secret, and then showed up and kind of popped into view magically, which is what happened here. He just popped into view. And all of Israel kind of went, say, what? What? Who are you? They weren't expecting him. It was secretive. And God did this on purpose so that when he came like this baby, little Jewish baby, and they don't know what's going on, and then he grows up and he doesn't even have a rabbi, doesn't even go to a yeshiva from some rabbi, and yet he knows everything. And he just kind of magically does all this amazing stuff, and everybody's like, who are you? He couldn't be the Messiah, could he? Well, nobody's done any more miracles than he has. Yeah, but we don't know where the Messiah is coming from. And we know where he's coming from. It's very confusing. And then he lied to us about it to keep it secret. And then he shows up and then dies and provides salvation. Just like that. And I believe that's why Yeshua did this in the middle of the festival. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the fact that you are so mischievous and you are not afraid to do anything, try anything, attempt anything to reach us. And I thank you, Abba, that we are sent out with your power, we're sent out with your anointing, we're sent out with your words, and we are you with that message. We are you with that message, just like Yeshua was you with that message. And I thank you, Abba, for bringing your power through your Ruach HaKodesh and for sending us to all the 70 nations so they can see your glory and hear of your fame from your Torah. Only from your Torah, only from your Tanakh, only from your word. Thank you, Abba, that when you send out your word, it does not ever produce nothing. It always produces what you want it to produce. And I ask that you would produce in our lives a huge harvest during this year. I thank you for Sukkot. I thank you that we're right smack in the middle of Sukkot. And I ask for you to bring the rain, Lord. Mashiv haruach umorid hagashem. You make the wind blow and you make the rain to come. And I thank you, Abba, that now is when we start praying that. And I ask that you send your ruach like rain to produce fruit for us and in us. In the name of Yeshua. Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Let's do Kiddush over at the Kiddush table. Can we turn the lights on, please? Thanks.